The sun was burning high over the quiet city streets when a deep red Ferrari came rolling down the road, its engine purring like a lion. Everyone turned their heads to look. The car was bright, loud, and full of pride, just like the man driving it. His name was Richard Collins, a well-known millionaire who believed money could buy everything: comfort, respect, even happiness. He had a sharp suit, golden watch, and sunglasses that reflected nothing but his own arrogance. But as the Ferrari sped through the city, something strange happened. A loud clicking sound came from under the hood. The engine began to cough, then sputter, then suddenly died right in the middle of the street. The silence that followed was awkward and heavy. Richard hit the steering wheel in anger. "What the hell is wrong now?" he shouted. His voice echoed between the tall buildings. People walking by looked for a second and then moved on. No one wanted to get involved. But from across the street, sitting on a sidewalk near an old gas station, a homeless man lifted his head. His name was Sam, a thin man in his late 40s, with tired eyes and a calm face. His clothes were dirty, but his posture was still proud. He had been sitting quietly with an empty cup beside him, hoping someone might drop a few coins. He watched the furious rich man kick the tire of the Ferrari. A faint smile appeared on Sam's face, not out of mockery, but because he knew that kind of frustration too well, the feeling when something expensive breaks, and no amount of anger can fix it. Slowly, Sam stood up and walked closer, dragging his old backpack behind him. Richard noticed him coming and frowned. "What do you want, old man?" "I don't have any change," he said sharply. Sam stopped a few steps away. "I don't need your change," he replied quietly. "Your car isn't starting. Maybe I can help." For a moment, Richard just stared at him, then burst out laughing. "You? Help me? You can't even help yourself. Look at you. You think you can fix a Ferrari?" His voice was full of arrogance and disbelief. Sam didn't answer. He simply looked at the car's engine as if studying it from a distance. His eyes were calm, but behind them, there was knowledge, deep, old knowledge. "Sometimes it's not about money, sir," he said softly. "It's about knowing how things work." Richard rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. Why don't you go fix your life first?" He turned his back and started calling his assistant on the phone. But the call didn't go through. The network was weak here. He cursed again and kicked the tire harder. Sam took a small step closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "Sir," he said in a steady voice, "it looks like your engine overheated. May I just take a look?" Richard turned around with a mocking grin. "Fine. You know what? Go ahead. If you make this thing run, I'll give it to you." He laughed loudly, as if it were the funniest joke in the world. The people nearby stopped and stared. A few teenagers began recording on their phones. The idea of a homeless man touching a millionaire's Ferrari was both funny and unbelievable. Richard crossed his arms, confident that the man would fail and give him another reason to laugh. Sam nodded once, calm and quiet. He opened his bag and pulled out a small rusty wrench and an old screwdriver, tools that looked as tired as he did. He walked to the front of the car and lifted the hood. Steam hissed out, making the air shimmer. Richard kept smirking. "Careful, old man, don't break it even more." Sam ignored him. He looked around the engine carefully, touching wires and pipes with steady, experienced hands. His fingers moved slowly, gently, like someone remembering a song they hadn't played in years. He wiped some grease off the side, then tightened a loose bolt. The camera would focus on Richard's face now, a face full of disbelief turning slowly into confusion. There was something different about this homeless man. He didn't look lost anymore. He looked like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. After a few minutes, Sam stepped back and said, "Try now." Richard laughed. "You're serious? Fine." He got into the driver's seat, twisted the key, and nothing happened. He turned it again. Still nothing. He smirked. See? Waste of time. But Sam didn't move. He walked back to the front, adjusted one small wire, and then said again, "Now, please try again, sir." This time, when Richard turned the key, the Ferrari made a deep growl. The engine coughed once, twice, then suddenly roared to life, shaking the air. The crowd gasped. For a moment, Richard froze. He couldn't believe it. His expensive car, which even his mechanic couldn't fix last week, was now running perfectly. He stepped out, his mouth slightly open. How did you?" Sam just smiled faintly. Sometimes, all it takes is a clean connection. He wiped his hands with an old piece of cloth, put his tools back in his bag, and turned to walk away. Richard shouted after him, "Wait! Who are you?" Sam didn't look back. "Just someone who used to know about engines," he said quietly. Then he walked toward the fading sunlight, his shadow long and lonely on the road. The crowd began to whisper. Some clapped lightly. But Richard stood frozen beside his running Ferrari, his laughter gone. For the first time that day, he didn't feel powerful, he felt small. As the sound of the Ferrari's engine filled the street, the millionaire watched the homeless man disappear into the distance, not knowing that this small encounter was about to change his life forever. And from that moment, the real story began. Richard stood there, staring at the back of the homeless man as he walked away. The sound of the Ferrari's engine still echoed through the quiet street, but Richard's mind was louder, confused, embarrassed, and strangely curious. He couldn't believe what just happened. A man who lived on the sidewalk had done what his expensive mechanics couldn't. It didn't make sense. The crowd that had gathered began to move away, but some were still whispering. A few had recorded the whole scene on their phones. Richard noticed one of them pointing the camera at him and felt a sting of shame. "Get out of here," he barked. The onlookers scattered, leaving him alone with his pride and his running Ferrari. He looked down at his own reflection in the shiny red paint. For a brief second, he saw not a successful businessman, but a fool, a man who had just been outsmarted by someone the world ignored. He clenched his fists and took a deep breath. "No," he muttered, "I'm still in control." He couldn't stand the thought that a homeless man had made him look weak. A few minutes later, he spotted Sam sitting again near the gas station, back in the same spot, quietly fixing the strap of his old backpack. Something inside Richard twisted, part anger, part curiosity. He walked toward him. "Hey!" he shouted. Sam looked up calmly. "Yes, sir?" Richard smirked. "So you really think you're some kind of hero now? Fixed one car, huh? Must be your lucky day." Sam didn't reply. He just gave a faint smile and said, "No, sir. Just experience. I used to fix engines before." That line hit Richard's pride again. "Before what?" he asked sharply. "Before you decided to live on the streets and beg for money?" Sam's expression didn't change. "Before life took a few wrong turns," he said softly. "But I'm not begging, sir. I just help when I can." Richard laughed, a loud, mocking laugh that made people turn their heads again. "Help when you can? You live in dirt, man. Look at you. You think fixing my car makes you any different?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. Sam looked down, not out of shame, but to keep his calm. "Maybe not, sir," he said quietly. "But I'm glad your car works now." Richard crossed his arms, his expensive watch catching the sunlight. "You remember what I said, right?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I said if you make it run, it's yours. So, what now? You want to drive away in my Ferrari?" Sam looked up, a small, kind smile on his face. "I don't want your car," he said. "I only wanted to help." Richard's smirk faded slightly. He wasn't expecting that answer. He wanted the man to beg, to act desperate. Instead, the homeless man sounded peaceful, stronger, even. That made Richard more irritated. "You know," Richard said coldly, "people like you always say things like that. I just wanted to help. But the truth is, you're all the same. You expect something in return. Money. Food. A favor. So, tell me, what do you really want?" Sam met his eyes. "Nothing, sir. I already got what I wanted." "And what's that?" Richard scoffed. "A reminder," Sam said, "that I can still do something good today." Richard froze for a second, then let out a bitter laugh. "You're unbelievable." He turned to walk away, shaking his head. But as he stepped back toward the car, he stopped. Something about Sam's calm voice bothered him, the kind of calm that doesn't come from weakness, but from peace. He turned around again, his anger bubbling up. "You know what, old man? You talk like you've figured out life, but you're sitting on the street. If you're so wise, why are you here? Why don't you have a house, a job, a family?" This time, Sam's voice lowered. "I did," he said. "Once." Richard's laughter stopped. "What?" "I had all those things," Sam continued, looking into the distance. "But life has a way of testing what we value most." Richard didn't know what to say. He scoffed to hide his discomfort. "Yeah, well, maybe you just weren't strong enough to keep them." Sam didn't argue. "Maybe," he said softly. "Or maybe strength means getting up again, even when you've lost everything." For the first time, Richard had no quick comeback. His mouth opened, then closed. He turned away quickly. "You're wasting your words," he muttered. "You think philosophy will fix your life?" Sam gave a small smile. "No, sir. But kindness might fix someone else's." Richard froze again. Those words hit somewhere deep, a place he didn't visit often. A place he had buried under money, deals, and pride. He wanted to say something cruel, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, he sneered and said, "You really are full of speeches, aren't you?" Sam didn't reply. He just reached into his bag and pulled out a small photo. It was old and wrinkled, a picture of a little girl smiling beside a man in a mechanic's uniform. Richard noticed his hands trembling slightly as he looked at it. Before Richard could ask, Sam quietly put the photo away and said, "Have a good day, sir." Then he lay back against the wall, eyes half closed, tired but peaceful. Richard stood there, uncertain. Something in his chest felt heavy. He wanted to speak, but his pride wouldn't let him. So he walked back to his Ferrari, the car gleaming under the sun, and sat inside. He looked at his own reflection again, but this time, he didn't like what he saw. As he drove off, the sound of the engine filled the air again. But to Richard, it didn't sound powerful anymore. It sounded empty, hollow, like the laughter he had used to cover his own shame. Behind him, the homeless man closed his eyes and whispered something no one could hear. And though Richard didn't know it yet, that quiet man on the street had already started changing his heart, one small crack at a time. The day was not over. The lesson hadn't even begun. That night, the city grew quiet under a sky full of tired clouds. The streets shimmered faintly from the light rain that had started to fall. Richard sat inside his large, modern mansion, a home built on glass, steel, and pride. The Ferrari was parked outside, shining under the garden lights as if nothing had ever gone wrong with it. But inside, something was wrong. He tried to distract himself with his favorite whiskey, his phone, and his endless list of business calls, yet his mind kept replaying the same image, the homeless man's calm face, his soft voice, and those strange words, "Maybe strength means getting up again, even when you've lost everything." Richard put his glass down and leaned back in his chair. "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" he muttered. He didn't even know the man's name properly. He only remembered his voice, low and steady, cutting through his arrogance like a blade. He opened his laptop, half out of curiosity, half out of guilt. On the local news website, a video thumbnail caught his eye. Homeless man fixes millionaire's Ferrari, kindness in the city. Someone from the crowd had uploaded the video. Richard clicked on it, and there he was, standing beside his Ferrari, laughing like a fool while the man worked silently. In the comments, people weren't praising him, they were praising the homeless man. That poor guy has more class than the rich man. Money can't buy respect. Hope he gets a better life. He deserves it. Richard's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt something close to shame. He closed the laptop quickly and looked out the window. Rain tapped against the glass, steady and soft, just like the man's voice in his memory. Meanwhile, not far away, Sam sat beneath an old bridge, his only shelter from the rain. He had spread out a thin blanket and was using his backpack as a pillow. His tools were placed neatly beside him, wrapped in cloth to stay dry. He wasn't angry, not even sad, just tired. As he lay there, listening to the rain, memories began to drift back like old ghosts. Once, not long ago, he had a small workshop, Sam's Auto Care. The walls were painted blue, the floor smelled of oil, and there was always music playing from a little radio near the counter. He could still hear his daughter's laughter echoing through the place as she ran between the cars. Her name was Lily, and she had the same bright smile he now kept in that old photo. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to help you fix cars," she'd said once, holding a toy wrench. He had laughed and lifted her in his arms. "You can fix the world if you want, sweetheart," he told her. "You just need heart." Those were good days. Simple. Honest. He didn't have much, but he had everything that mattered, a family, a dream, and a reason to wake up every morning. But good times, he learned, don't always stay. One cold night, a fire started in his workshop. The cause was small, a spark from a faulty wire, but the result was cruel. Flames swallowed the place in minutes. He tried to fight it, coughing, choking, screaming Lily's name as the smoke rose higher. His wife, Maria, had pulled him out, crying, but his hands were burned, his tools destroyed, his dream gone. They lost everything that night, the shop, their savings, their home. Insurance didn't cover the damage because of an expired policy. Maria fell ill soon after, her body too weak, her spirit too broken. Sam worked small jobs, but his burnt hands made it difficult. The bills piled up faster than his hope. He spent every last coin trying to keep Maria alive. And when she finally passed away, something inside him broke quietly, like a piece of glass shattering where no one could see. After that, Lily was taken to a care home because Sam couldn't afford to feed her. "It's just for a little while," he'd promised her, kissing her forehead. But a little while turned into months, then years. He lost contact. The city grew colder, and his days blended into one another. He slept on benches, under bridges, near streetlights that hummed through the night. People walked past him every day, some pretending not to see, others throwing coins like mercy. Yet inside, he never forgot who he was. The world saw a homeless man, but he still saw a father, a husband, a mechanic, someone who once built, loved, and cared. So when he saw that red Ferrari break down earlier that day, something old had stirred in him, something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. He had approached not because he wanted money, but because, for a few minutes, he wanted to feel useful again. To remind himself he could still fix something, even if it wasn't his own life. As the rain fell harder, he pulled the little photo from his bag, the one of Lily smiling in her pink dress. He ran his thumb over her face, whispering softly, "Daddy's still trying, sweetheart. Still trying." His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He looked out into the wet, shining street and saw the city lights blur in his tears. In those reflections, he didn't see failure anymore, just survival. Back at his mansion, Richard couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sam's calm expression and that small, worn-out photo he'd held. He wondered who the girl was. He wondered what kind of man could lose everything and still speak with peace instead of hate. He walked to the window and stared at his Ferrari again, the car he once saw as proof of success. Now it looked different. It was just metal and paint. Cold. Soulless. He remembered how Sam's rough hands had fixed it with patience and skill, not pride. For a man who had everything, Richard suddenly felt like the poorest person in the world. He whispered to himself, "What have I been doing all this time?" His mind wouldn't rest. By morning, he had made a decision. He needed to see that man again, not to mock him, not to test him, but to understand him. He didn't know it yet, but finding Sam again would change his life forever. The morning air carried a strange stillness as the city slowly woke up. Cars honked in the distance, coffee shops opened their doors, and the world moved on, but Richard hadn't slept all night. He sat at his wide kitchen table, his untouched breakfast getting cold. His mind was replaying every word, every glance, every quiet moment from the day before. He couldn't shake it off. The face of that homeless man, Sam, kept returning in his thoughts. The way he spoke, the way he smiled even after being insulted, and the way he fixed that Ferrari as if it meant nothing at all. Finally, Richard stood up, grabbed his car keys, and walked out to the driveway. The Ferrari gleamed under the morning sun, looking perfect again, alive, powerful, beautiful. But somehow, Richard didn't feel the same pride he used to. The car that once symbolized his success now felt like a mirror reflecting everything ugly inside him. He got in and turned the key. The engine started with a deep growl, smooth, flawless. It ran better than it had in months. He stared at the dashboard for a moment, almost hearing Sam's calm voice again. "Sometimes it's not about money, sir. It's about knowing how things work." Richard sighed, gripping the steering wheel. How could a man like him fix this car so easily? How could I have been so blind? He drove aimlessly through the city, past tall buildings and busy streets, until he reached the same area where his Ferrari had broken down yesterday. The gas station was quiet now. The sidewalk was almost empty. The spot where Sam had been sitting was just a wet patch of concrete. Richard parked and got out, scanning the area. "Where did you go?" he muttered. He walked around, asking a shopkeeper nearby. "Excuse me," he said. "There was a man here yesterday. Homeless. Thin guy, around 40. You know where he went?" The shopkeeper thought for a second. "Oh, that guy? Yeah, I've seen him around. Sometimes he fixes bicycles for the kids. Kind of keeps to himself. Kind man, though. He was here last night when it started raining. Left after that, I think." Richard nodded. "Thanks." He got back into the car, his mind heavy with guilt. He remembered how he had laughed at Sam, how he'd called him useless, dirty, broken. And yet, that same man had fixed his car without asking for a single coin. He drove slowly around the nearby blocks, looking for any sign of him. And then, a few streets down, he saw something, a figure sitting under a bridge, near a small fire made from scraps of cardboard. It was Sam. Richard stopped the car and got out. The noise of the Ferrari's engine made Sam lift his head. His face looked tired, but when he saw Richard, he gave a small polite nod, like nothing unusual had happened. "Morning, sir," he said, his voice calm as always. Richard hesitated before speaking. "You remember me?" Sam smiled faintly. Hard to forget a red Ferrari. That small joke caught Richard off guard. He almost smiled, but guilt washed over him too quickly. He took a few steps closer. "Listen, about yesterday. I wasn't fair to you." Sam shook his head. "It's all right, sir. I've heard worse." "No," Richard said firmly. "It's not all right. I acted like a fool. You helped me, and I treated you like trash." Sam looked at him quietly, then said, "Sometimes people show what's inside them when they're angry. Don't be too hard on yourself." Richard was stunned by how kind that response was. He didn't deserve it. "You fixed my car," he said softly, "and you didn't even ask for anything in return." "Why?" Sam looked at the little fire flickering between them. "Because helping makes me feel human again," he said. "When you lose everything, it's easy to forget what that feels like." The words struck deep. Richard didn't know what to say. He wanted to ask more, to understand, to know how a man with nothing could still have so much peace in his heart. But before he could speak, Sam began to cough, a harsh, tired sound that echoed under the bridge. Richard's eyes softened. "Are you okay?" Sam waved a hand. "Just the cold. Nothing new." "Have you eaten?" "Not yet. I'll find something later." Without thinking, Richard reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and offered a few bills. Sam looked at the money but didn't take it. "I didn't help for that," he said quietly. "I know," Richard replied. "But, please. Take it anyway." Sam paused, then slowly took the money, not out of greed, but out of respect for the gesture. "Thank you, sir." Richard looked around at the bridge, the damp ground, the cardboard, the worn-out blanket. It broke something inside him. "You shouldn't be living like this," he said softly. Sam smiled sadly. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan. But it still goes on." For a few seconds, neither man spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the Ferrari engine and the quiet crackle of the small fire. Then Sam said something that stayed with Richard forever. "You know, sir, sometimes it's not the car that needs fixing. Sometimes it's the driver." Richard froze. Those words hit harder than anything he'd ever heard. He realized Sam wasn't talking about the car anymore, he was talking about him. Richard nodded slowly, speechless. He turned toward the Ferrari, looking at it one last time, then back at Sam. "You fixed my car," he said. "Maybe you just fixed more than that." Sam gave a quiet smile. "Maybe." Richard got back into the Ferrari and sat for a moment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The man he saw wasn't the same one who had laughed yesterday. He looked older, humbler, someone finally beginning to understand what mattered. As he drove away, the sound of the Ferrari's engine filled the morning air again. But this time, it didn't sound proud or loud. It sounded alive, as if the car itself carried the weight of the lesson he had just learned. And though Richard didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of his transformation. Because what Sam had repaired that day wasn't just a broken engine, it was the start of a broken soul being rebuilt, piece by piece. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the city, painting the streets in soft gold. Richard sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls, expensive art, and the hum of silent air conditioning. Normally, this space made him feel powerful, successful, but today, it felt hollow. He had spent the entire night thinking about the man under the bridge, the man who had more peace in his broken life than Richard ever had in his empire of wealth. He opened his laptop again, this time searching local news pages. The same video of the Ferrari was still trending. In the comments, strangers were writing things that cut deep. "That rich man looked so arrogant." "That homeless guy deserves a job." "Hope the millionaire learned something." Richard leaned back in his chair. He had learned something, but it wasn't enough to just feel regret. He needed to do something. He couldn't get Sam's words out of his head. Sometimes it's not the car that needs fixing. Sometimes it's the driver. He stood up suddenly, grabbed his jacket, and walked out. His assistant called after him, "Sir, your meeting with the investors." "Cancel it," Richard said. Something more important came up. The drive across the city felt different that day. The same Ferrari that once symbolized power now carried humility. The city's noise didn't irritate him anymore. He noticed people, faces, lives moving all around him. And for the first time, he wondered how many stories like Sam's were hidden behind those tired eyes on every corner. He parked near the same bridge and stepped out, looking around. The morning air smelled of smoke and wet pavement. He walked closer and saw Sam again, crouched beside a small bicycle, fixing its chain for a little boy who waited patiently beside him. The sight made Richard stop in his tracks. Even with nothing, no home, no job, no comfort, Sam was helping someone else. The boy thanked him and rode away, smiling. Sam wiped his hands on his shirt, then noticed Richard standing there. He gave a calm nod. "Morning again, sir." Richard smiled slightly. "Morning, Sam." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You remember my name." "I made sure to ask the shopkeeper," Richard said. "Figured I should at least know the name of the man who fixed my car, and maybe my attitude." Sam chuckled softly. "You're not the first one who's had a bad day." Richard shook his head. "It's more than that, Sam. I was wrong about you. I judged you because of how you looked. And that's something I've been doing to people for years." Sam stayed silent, watching him. Richard continued, his voice quieter now. "You said something yesterday about the driver needing fixing. You were right. I've spent my whole life chasing money, success, status, and still, I don't feel alive. You, with nothing, looked more at peace than I've ever been." Sam smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes softening. "Peace doesn't come from what you have, sir. It comes from what you carry inside." Richard took a deep breath. "Then I want to start carrying something better." He looked around at the bridge, the broken cardboard shelter, the damp ground. "You shouldn't be living like this. You deserve better." Sam's expression turned serious. "I've heard that before," he said gently. "But most people just say it to feel good about themselves." "I'm not just saying it," Richard replied firmly. "I want to help. For real this time." Sam studied his face carefully, as if trying to see whether he meant it. "And what do you plan to do, sir? Buy me a house? Give me money?" Richard shook his head. "No. That's not what you need. You don't need charity, you need a chance." Sam blinked slowly. "A chance?" "Yes," Richard said, stepping closer. "You fixed my Ferrari when even my trained mechanics couldn't. You have skill. You have patience. You have something money can't buy." He took a small pause. "I own a chain of luxury car dealerships, and each one has its own service center. I want you to come work for me. Start with the garage. Show everyone what you can do." Sam's eyes widened slightly, unsure if he'd heard right. "You're offering me a job?" Richard nodded. "Not out of pity, but because you deserve it. You've already proved yourself." For a moment, Sam didn't answer. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once built a life, lost it, and then saved a stranger's car without expecting anything back. His throat tightened. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Richard said with a small smile. "Let me make things right." Sam looked up at him, emotion glimmering behind his tired eyes. "I haven't worked in years. My hands, they're not as strong as they used to be." Richard shook his head. "Then we'll start slow. I'll make sure you have what you need. Tools, training, whatever it takes. You just bring that heart of yours." A long silence followed. Finally, Sam nodded slowly. "All right," he said softly. "I'll try." Richard smiled, relief washing over his face. "Good. Come by tomorrow. I'll pick you up myself." Sam gave a short, almost disbelieving laugh. "You really mean it, don't you?" "Every word." The two men stood there for a moment, one in an expensive suit, one in worn-out clothes, yet somehow, they seemed equal now. The air between them wasn't filled with pride or shame anymore, but something purer, respect. Before leaving, Richard said, "You fixed my Ferrari, Sam. Now let me help fix your future." Sam's eyes glistened. "You've already done more than you know, sir." As Richard got back into his car and drove off, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Sam was still standing there, watching him leave, a small hopeful smile on his face. For the first time in years, that smile wasn't just polite, it was real. And for Richard, it wasn't the Ferrari's smooth hum that made him feel powerful that day. It was the sound of change, quiet, steady, and honest. He didn't know it yet, but this single offer would not only give Sam a second chance at life, it would also give Richard something he had lost long ago, his humanity. The next day, the air was filled with a quiet excitement. Richard's Ferrari purred smoothly as he drove toward the garage, but this time, the car didn't feel like a trophy, it felt like a reminder. Every time he glanced at its shining hood, he remembered the man who'd fixed it with nothing but faith and steady hands. He stopped in front of one of his own car dealerships, a tall glass building with a golden sign that read Harper Motors. Employees hurried around in crisp uniforms, nodding politely as he walked in. Richard's presence always demanded attention, but today, his face carried a softness they weren't used to seeing. He went straight to the service area at the back, where the smell of oil and metal filled the air. Sam was already there, standing beside a car lift, wearing a clean gray mechanic's uniform. It was slightly loose, but it fit him better than the torn jacket he'd worn under the bridge. His hair was trimmed, his hands were clean, and there was something in his eyes, a quiet confidence returning, piece by piece. When Richard approached, Sam looked up and smiled. "Didn't think I'd ever wear something like this again," he said. Richard smiled back. "You look like you belong here." "I used to," Sam said softly, looking around. "A long time ago." Richard tilted his head. "You used to work in a place like this?" Sam nodded slowly. "Yeah. I was a mechanic for nearly 15 years. Had a shop of my own. Things were good for a while." He paused, tightening a bolt on the car in front of him. But one accident, one bad year, and everything fell apart. Richard's voice grew quiet. "The accident?" Sam sighed. "My wife and daughter. A drunk driver hit them one night. They didn't make it. I tried to keep the business going, but I just couldn't. I stopped caring. Lost the shop. Lost my home. Lost myself." The words hit Richard like a punch to the chest. He took a deep breath, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He'd known loss, of trust, of purpose, but not like that. "I'm sorry," Richard said quietly. Sam shrugged gently. "It's life. It breaks you, but you either stay broken or try to fix yourself." "Guess I'm still trying." Richard stood there for a long moment, watching the man who had every reason to give up, and yet chose to keep moving. For years, he had believed money solved everything. Now he saw the truth, it could never fix what really mattered. Later that day, after Sam finished his first shift, Richard invited him to his office. They sat across from each other, two men from different worlds, connected by something deeper than wealth or class. "I need to tell you something," Richard began. "You think I helped you today, but the truth is, you helped me first. When I mocked you that night, I thought I was proving I was better. But I was just proving how lost I'd become." Sam listened quietly. "I built my life around success," Richard continued. "I thought the more I owned, the more I mattered. But when I saw you fix that car, with nothing but skill, patience, and calm, I realized how empty I was. You reminded me what real strength looks like." Sam smiled faintly. "We all lose our way sometimes. But finding it again, that's what matters." Richard nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. "You've given me something I can't buy, perspective. I thought regret was weakness. But now I see it's where healing begins." The office fell silent for a moment, the sound of city traffic humming faintly outside. Then Richard leaned forward. "I've been thinking of doing something new. Something that might help more people like you. Maybe open a community garage, a place where homeless people can learn skills, work with cars, rebuild their lives. What do you think?" Sam's eyes widened slightly. That's a big idea." Richard smiled. "It started with one man fixing a Ferrari. Why not let it fix more lives too?" For the first time in years, Sam laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that filled the room. "You really mean it, don't you?" "Every word," Richard said. "And I'll need someone to help me run it." Sam's eyes glistened. "You're asking me?" Richard nodded. "Who better than the man who reminded me what second chances mean?" A silence hung between them, not awkward, but powerful. Two broken men, both healing in their own way, both realizing that redemption wasn't about money or power. It was about heart. As Sam left the office that evening, Richard sat alone for a while, staring out the window at the fading sunset. The sky burned orange and gold, the same colors that had shone on his Ferrari the day he'd mocked a man he didn't understand. Now, every time he saw that car, he would remember something else, not his arrogance, but his awakening. He whispered softly to himself, "Regret is only painful when you refuse to change. But when you do, it becomes the beginning of something beautiful." And for the first time in his life, Richard Harper, the millionaire who once mocked a homeless man, felt truly, deeply grateful. Weeks passed, and the city began to whisper a new story, not about wealth or power, but about second chances. At the edge of downtown, a new building was rising, its walls painted white and blue, its sign gleaming in the sunlight, the Hope Garage. It wasn't one of Richard's luxury dealerships. There were no glass walls, no marble floors, no expensive cars. Instead, it was filled with tools, workbenches, and people, men and women who had been forgotten by society. Some had lost homes, some had lost families, and some had simply lost hope. But here, every day, they worked together to fix broken cars and broken lives. And leading them was Sam. He moved through the garage with calm confidence, teaching younger workers how to use tools, showing patience when they made mistakes, and sharing quiet advice that went deeper than mechanics. His clothes were clean, his face brighter, his spirit alive again. He still lived simply, but now he had purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. One day, while repairing an old pickup truck, a young man named Danny, a thin kid with restless eyes, looked up at him and asked, "Mr. Sam, were you really homeless once?" Sam smiled gently. "Yeah. For a long time." Danny frowned. "But you don't look like someone who gave up." Sam chuckled softly. "I did give up once. But then someone reminded me that being down doesn't mean being done. You can fall 100 times, it only takes one decision to get up again." Danny thought about that and smiled. "I want to be like you someday." Sam patted his shoulder. "No, kid. Be better." Later that afternoon, Richard arrived. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, instead, he wore simple jeans and a jacket, his hair slightly messy from the wind. He walked through the garage, greeting everyone by name. They didn't call him Sir anymore. They called him Richard. Sam wiped his hands and smiled as Richard approached. "Didn't expect the boss today." Richard laughed. "I'm not the boss here, you are. I just come to check if my favorite teacher is still changing lives." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You're still terrible at compliments." They both laughed, the sound echoing warmly through the garage. Richard looked around, pride glowing in his eyes. "You know, Sam, when I first came to you under that bridge, I thought I was helping you. But this place, this idea, it's helped me more than you can imagine." Sam tilted his head. "Funny how life works. The man who had everything needed saving too." Richard nodded slowly. "Yeah. I used to think success meant having no regrets. Now I know success is using regret to become someone better. Just then, a customer walked in, a woman holding her young daughter's hand. Her old car had broken down near the garage. Sam greeted her kindly and promised they'd fix it for free. As the little girl looked around with wide eyes, Sam handed her a small wrench and said, "Want to help me tighten this bolt?" The girl giggled, nodding eagerly. Richard stood back and watched the scene, the laughter, the teamwork, the simple joy that filled the place. For the first time, he didn't feel like a businessman. He felt like a human being, someone finally doing something that mattered. That evening, after everyone left, Richard and Sam sat on the front steps of the garage, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. The air was cool, carrying the scent of oil, metal, and new beginnings. "You ever think about how strange it is?" Richard asked. "A broken Ferrari brought us here." Sam chuckled. "Guess everything happens for a reason." Richard looked at him seriously. "You ever miss your old life? Before everything happened?" Sam thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said softly. "But I think, if I hadn't lost it, I wouldn't have found this. Or met you." Richard smiled faintly. "You saved me, Sam. I was rich in everything except what mattered. Now, I finally understand that the real luxury is peace." Sam nodded. "And peace comes when you stop running from your past and start fixing it." For a long time, they sat there in silence, two men who had started as strangers from different worlds, now bound by a story that had changed them both. In the distance, a car passed by, an old Ferrari, polished and gleaming under the streetlights. Richard smiled at the sight. That same car had once been a symbol of arrogance and pride. Now, it was the reminder of humility and transformation. As the lights of the city flickered on, Sam stood up and said, "Come on, boss. We've got work to do tomorrow." Richard laughed. "You'll never stop calling me that, will you?" "Not if you keep acting like a good one." And as they walked back inside the garage, the world outside grew darker, but inside, the light kept burning. Not from neon signs or gold logos, but from something far stronger, the glow of redemption. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformations don't come from money or miracles. They come from a change of heart. Months passed, and the Hope Garage had become more than just a workshop, it was a movement. People from all over the city came, not just to fix cars, but to rebuild their lives. What started as a small dream between two unlikely men had grown into something extraordinary. Reporters visited often, writing headlines like, "Millionaire and Homeless Man Open Garage That Changes Lives." From broken Ferrari to Hope Factory, the story that's inspiring a nation. But for Richard and Sam, it was never about the fame. Every time they saw someone walk in with fear and walk out with confidence, it reminded them why they had started. One cold evening, Richard stood by the window of his office at the garage, watching as the last few workers cleaned up for the night. The warm light from the building spilled out into the dark street. He could see Sam outside, sitting with Danny, the young man who had once been lost, now guiding another new recruit through his first car repair. Richard smiled quietly. Sam had become more than just a mechanic again. He was a mentor, a symbol of what second chances could do. He thought back to the night under the bridge, the rain, the broken Ferrari, his cruel laughter. It felt like another lifetime. That version of himself was gone, buried under the weight of lessons learned the hard way. Later, as the lights dimmed and the workers left, Sam walked into the office, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're still here," he said with a small grin. Richard turned, smiling. "Couldn't leave without checking in on my favorite teacher." Sam laughed softly. "You really should start going home earlier. You're the boss, remember?" Richard shook his head. "Not anymore. You were right, I was missing something in my life. This place, these people, they've filled that emptiness." Sam nodded, sitting down across from him. "You've come a long way, Richard." "So have you," Richard replied. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? Sam looked down, thoughtful. Maybe I'd still be under that bridge. Maybe you'd still be trapped in your world of pride. He smiled faintly. Either way, neither of us would have learned what we know now. Richard leaned back. And what's that? That sometimes, Sam said quietly, God doesn't send you what you want, He sends you what you need. Even if it comes in the form of a broken car. They both laughed softly, the truth of the words settling between them like a warm light. A few weeks later, the Hope Garage held its first graduation day. The workers who had trained under Sam now had jobs, some in other workshops, some in dealerships, some even starting their own small repair shops. Families came to celebrate, clapping, cheering, crying. Sam stood on the small stage, nervous but proud. He looked at all the faces in the crowd, people who had once been invisible now standing tall. He began, his voice steady and sincere. Not long ago, I was one of you. Lost, forgotten, invisible. But someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That belief saved me. He paused, glancing toward Richard, who stood at the back of the crowd, smiling. So, if you ever think your life is too broken to fix, remember this, even a Ferrari needs a mechanic. And sometimes, so do we. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cried, some smiled, but every person felt the truth in his words. Richard's eyes glistened. It wasn't pride he felt, it was peace. Real, deep peace. That night, after everyone had gone, Richard and Sam stood outside the garage once more. The stars shone brightly above, reflecting off the polished hood of the same Ferrari that had started it all. Richard placed his hand on the car. Funny how something that once made me arrogant now reminds me to stay humble. Sam smiled. Because it's not about what we drive, Richard. It's about what drives us. Richard nodded slowly. You're right. It always was. They stood there in silence for a long moment, two men who had walked through pride, pain, and redemption, and found purpose on the other side. Finally, Richard said quietly, "Thank you, Sam, for everything." Sam looked up at the stars. "Don't thank me, my friend. Just promise me one thing, never forget where we came from." "I won't," Richard said. The two men shook hands, their friendship stronger than any deal, any fortune, any Ferrari. And as they walked back inside, the sign above the door glowed softly in the night. The Hope Garage. Underneath it, someone had painted a small message in white paint. No one is too broken to be fixed. The story of a millionaire and a homeless man had come full circle, a story not about money or mistakes, but about change, forgiveness, and hope. Because sometimes, life doesn't give you what you expect. It gives you exactly what you need.